Mayor Frank Jackson and the City of Cleveland are committed to keeping your neighborhood clean and green through the use of the city-issued trash and recycling carts. It's safe, convenient, and mandatory. For more information, contact the Cleveland Division of Waste Collection at 216-664-3717.
Welcome, everyone. Hello. Good afternoon. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's great to see the sustainable community in full force this afternoon. My name is Matt Gray. Yes. My name is Matt Gray, Chief of Sustainability with the city, and we have a jam-packed 2 days here. This afternoon we'll be going until about 5:30, and after that we're going to have a reception in the back. We hope you can all join us for that. But we'll kick this off with two leaders, without whom really this would not be possible. Mayor Jackson will provide some welcoming remarks, followed by Ron Richard of the Cleveland Foundation, our presenting sponsor. So thanks again for coming today.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you. You know, I want to welcome everyone. They tell me this is the 9th annual Sustainable Cleveland 2019 Summit. I thought 2009 and 2007 was 8, but they tell me it's 9. And so this is our 9th summit. And we will, as you know, this is what we do annually, as we want to keep the focus on how do we move Cleveland forward and keep Cleveland moving in the proper direction in regards to sustainability. And you know, our theme is how do we transform our economy into a sustainable economy by the year 2019 so that we can better position Cleveland where the world is going as opposed to where the world is today. That would not be possible to put on these summits without our sponsors. So I want to thank all of our sponsors, particularly the Cleveland Foundation, who is our presenting sponsor for the 2nd year in a row. So thanks to Ron Richard and the Cleveland Foundation. And the Flourishing Leadership Institute for facilitating. I believe this is their 2nd year also. Is that correct? Okay. You know, as I mentioned, how do we create a sustainable economy by the year 2019? And what I mean by that is that we want to be very clear that being environmentally friendly, having healthy people, is not in opposition to profit, and that there are many things that we can do as businesses that will allow us to be more profitable if we do them in a sustainable way. And as we move forward, we're finding more and more businesses adopting sustainable practices in order to meet their bottom line, and at the same time they're becoming more recognizing of the need to do it, and not only for their particular company, but as they get educated as to what sustainability means worldwide. And we're making progress, and each year we have a celebration year. This year is the year of vibrant green space. And as the city of Cleveland, we invest heavily in our green space. We partnership with other people, including Metro Parks and other people and we work with them on how do we create additional green space in order to not only have the green space, but how to have people interact with it and have that green space connect neighborhoods and connect communities and connect people. But the final thing I want to mention, and Matt Gray will go into it in more detail, is in 2019, it would be the 50th year of the legislation around clean water. And it was also the 50th anniversary of one of the times that the river caught on fire. And so what we want to do, we want to celebrate that year, not for the catching on fire, but celebrate it as in the progress that we're making. And to that end, today we're going to announce it, and Matt Gray will give you more details that we'll establish a 2019 steering committee to help make the 50th anniversary weekend a large sustainability event in the city of Cleveland, and we want to make it so in the entire country, because people will look to Cleveland on this 50th anniversary, and we want to make sure that we make a statement, and we want to work with you on what that statement is. And we will also be working with all of our local organizations, local neighborhoods and communities, so that whatever individuals, organizations, and neighborhoods want to do, we want that to fit into what we do as a city. So again, welcome to the summit. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for supporting us year after year. And now I'll introduce Mr. Ron Richard from the Cleveland Foundation.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's always an honor to follow the mayor to the podium. Welcome to the Sustainable Cleveland Summit. Thank you, Mayor Jackson, for your leadership in creating the Sustainable Cleveland Initiative. We at the Cleveland Foundation admire your enduring commitment to fostering a healthier, more resilient city, and we're very proud to return as the presenting sponsor of the summit this year. I'm thrilled to see so many of you here today who share a passion for protecting our city's future. Our mission at the Cleveland Foundation is to improve the quality of life for all of our residents. All of our priorities, social services, education, arts and culture, neighborhood redevelopment, the economy, they all rely on the underpinning of a healthy environment. And that's what sustainability is all about, of course, making our businesses, homes, and city work better and smarter for the long haul so we can enjoy healthy lives and so our children and grandchildren can do the same. As we think about the next generation, by the way, the Foundation's proud to support 40 Cleveland Public School students who will be here tomorrow as part of the Youth Sustainability Leadership Program. We'll rely on them and their peers to carry on the work going forward someday. In the last decade alone, the Foundation has granted out more than $35 million just here in Cleveland across a range of environmental causes. In this year of vibrant green space, I hope you can enjoy projects we've supported, including the new public square, Cleveland Foundation Lake Link Centennial Trail, and other opportunities to reconnect with the outdoors in your own neighborhoods. And we're also proud to support the Cleveland Metro Parks, which we helped to start 100 years ago. As they celebrate their centennial this year, I urge you to explore the rich network of Metro Parks available to us, something that I just couldn't believe when I moved to Cleveland, what great amenities we have in our parks. We'll continue to invest in ideas that sustain our communities, some of which will be generated at this very summit. Of course, we want our investments to last, and that's why sustainability's never been so important. The evidence of global warming is all around us. It can't be denied. From increased frequency and strength of hurricanes to droughts to wildfires to toxic algae blooms, the impacts, of course, are just projected to get worse. So collectively, we must act with greater urgency than ever before. And I believe it's critical to push for effective public policy at the local, state, and of course, national level, and for each of us to do our part. And certainly, Mayor Jackson and County Executive Budish are doing their parts, and we're proud to partner with many local nonprofits advocating on behalf of the environment. The corporate sector has a particularly important role to play, I think the most vital role to play. Our local and national companies must be explicit about their support for the environment and then integrate sustainability into their practices. And I think they've been pretty good about implementing sustainability plans, but they need to speak up in terms of national public policy. Saving nature, the water, trees, and land that many businesses depend on is one of the smartest commercial investments any business could make. After all, nature does have an economic value too. Lake Erie, for example, is the source of our drinking water and an outlet for recreation. But it's also a huge economic driver in the form of tourism, industry, and now advanced energy. The Foundation continues to support the LEEDCO project, to build the first ever offshore freshwater wind farm in the United States right on Lake Erie. In 2019, clean, green power generated by wind on Lake Erie could be fueling our city and our region, helping us to become energy independent, creating many new jobs, and reducing our global footprint, our carbon footprint. On November the 8th, the public can show their support for LEEDCO, and I really encourage all of you to do that. On November 8th, speak up at a public hearing in Cleveland City Council chambers for Cleveland's green energy future, and write a letter of support to the Ohio Power Siting Board, which has to approve the project. Talk to leaders where you work about buying some power from LEEDCO. We have a few more megawatts to sell. It's just one example of the many solutions being created right here in Cleveland. There are so many ways we can each work to make our shared home more sustainable. And that's what the summit's all about. Working together across different sectors for a greener future. So thanks again for joining us today for this summit. And I look forward to all that we're going to accomplish together. And I promise you the Cleveland Foundation will do its part to implement all the great ideas that come out of this summit. Thank you so much.
Welcome again to the summit. Thank you so much for coming today. It's really an honor to be standing in front of so many committed leaders in sustainability throughout our community. I want to recognize the sponsors and volunteers, and of course the Office of Sustainability staff. So Anand, Kathy, Erica, Kristen, Felina, and Rachel, as well as our interns Maddie and Nikki. It's a pleasure to work with you day in and day out. This is hard work. So please everyone give them a round of applause. And I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Janita Warner, the previous chief and all-around sustainability rock star. Last year at this time, Janita was on maternity leave and has since taken a position with the Sewer District as their sustainability manager. So we never really had an opportunity to say proper thank you as a community, so just please join me in doing that right now. Woo! And of course, Mayor Jackson. His commitment to this work is the definition of extraordinary. In fact, I believe we are the only city in this country to have hosted an event like this for 9 years in a row. He understood early on that this work is challenging and it requires sustained commitment over time. So thank you again, Mayor, for your leadership and foresight throughout this entire process. So my goal with this talk, it's not to summarize, what happened this year in sustainability. You and your peers have accomplished way too much in this past year to attempt that. My goal is to present, in microcosm what this summit is about and some key themes moving forward for the initiative. Sustainable Cleveland, first and foremost, is a community of people. That's why 2019 is the year of people. The mayor declared that a few years ago. The summit is an opportunity to renew and engage, connect with old friends, and meet some new ones as well. Working in sustainability, I know it can feel sometimes like 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but it's clear as a whole, we are making significant progress here in Cleveland. We work so hard throughout the year, so we often forget to celebrate what we've done, and part of the summit is really to do that over these next couple days. And above all, the summit is designed to innovate in key opportunity areas that support our mission. So in your workbook, you'll see on page 8 some of these topics, and page 7 some more little background on the summit objectives this year. So we pay great attention to who attends the summit and the sectors participating year-round. This is because we believe that to change an entire community, you have to have that entire community in the room working together. So who's in this ginormous auditorium? We have Clevelanders from all walk of life, including business people, advocates, government officials, retirees, artists. We have neighborhood climate ambassadors and much, much more. And of course, many of us wear many hats throughout. Because this is our 9th summit, we have participants with a wide variety of experience. So many people are brand new to sustainability, while others did this work, before it was called sustainability. Summits thrive on this mix of fresh perspective and really hard-fought expertise through the years. And for just about half of you, this is your first summit, so welcome. We need your new ideas and energy. On the other hand, about 30 of you, I think, have contributed to 7 or all 8 of the previous summits. So if that's you, please rise and be recognized. And if you're thinking about it hard, you should probably just rise. Thank you. So as Ron mentioned, about 40 youth have been selected as the second cohort of our Youth Sustainability Leadership Program. They will be here all day tomorrow, so thank you to CMSD, the Neighborhood Leadership Institute, and Earth Day Coalition for your partnership in this important work. These student leaders will be developing, really over the course of a school year, a sustainability project in their neighborhood or in their school. And for most, the summit is kind of a first step in developing some ideas around what that project might be. So I'm really curious to see what they come up with over these next 2 days. So these values you see here, these have really driven the initiative from the start. We believe that it's important to be dynamic and cumulative, building from year to year. We believe in building from strengths, not harping on perceived deficits. We're inclusive and welcoming, and we are bold while also seeking achievable solutions in this work. And above all, Sustainable Cleveland is about taking action. It is meant to serve as a resource that helps Clevelanders make smart, sustainable decisions, whether that's in your home, whether that's in your workplace, or in the larger community. The resource table in the back has some really handy pamphlets on what action looks like in each of these spheres. And, really from the start, the heart of Sustainable Cleveland has been its working groups. They often form at summits to achieve specific outcomes. So almost 70-ish of you are in active working groups. In addition, the summit sparks many initiatives in businesses, homes, and communities across Cleveland. So by the end of tomorrow, we hope to add value to those existing working groups, and who knows, we may actually create some new ones as well. So many working groups, we're calling them graduates here, have morphed over time into separate nonprofit and for-profit organizations. And more info on pages 13 to 15 of your guide on all of those. Another cornerstone of Sustainable Cleveland is measurement. Can't manage what you're not measuring. So our dashboard of 28 different indicators help inform strategy, highlight progress, and help communicate what's important to us, really, as a larger community. The idea is for everyone to be able to find at least one indicator that resonates with them and that they feel they can help move the ball forward on. The indicators are organized into the business environment, the social environment, the built environment, as well as the natural environment. And Sustainable Cleveland is organized by celebration years. 2017, as the mayor mentioned, is the year of vibrant green space, and next year, 2018, is the year of vital neighborhoods, which we're really excited about. How do you take all these sustainability topics, from energy efficiency to food, to solar, right, to waste, and down the line, and integrate that at the neighborhood level. So it's going to be a really exciting year, and looking to see what comes out of this summit to help us move in that direction. We work on all these topics all the time, but this annual focus of celebration topics kind of gives us an opportunity for additional collaboration throughout that year. So that is Sustainable Cleveland and the summit, really, in a nutshell. For the rest of my talk, I want to delve into really 3 overarching themes that frame the summit this year. So number 1, celebrating vibrant and accessible green space. Number 2, taking equitable climate action. And number 3, accelerating progress to 2019 and beyond, as the mayor teed up. So first, let's explore our 2017 celebration topic, vibrant green space. This starts actually on page 19 of your workbook. So the celebration committee for this included representation from about 40 organizations. And one of the first things we did was attempt to define vibrant green space. So you have it there, accessible and active public space that benefits all and connects people to place, nature, and one another. So in other words, in an urban environment like the one we have, it's really not enough just to be green. That space must also be activated with people building community. So events, there were so many great events this year focused on vibrant green space. And just to give a sense of the scope, please indulge me here. I'm going to list events that really took place in just the last 2 weeks here in Cleveland, Northeast Ohio. So there was a tour of Canal Basin Park, narrated by an actor playing Carl Stokes. There was the 4th Ciclavia of the summer in a celebration of open and green streets. The sewer district had their open house where nearly 3,000 people, 3,000 gathered on their Saturday to learn about sewers. I think that's really a testament to sewer district marketing as well as the people of Northeast Ohio. The tree steward trainings for residents led by Western Reserve Land Conservancy as well as Holden. The City Club had a great event at the beautiful Edgewater Beach House on diversifying America's parks. There was a Cleveland Pollinator and Native Plant Symposium. The Vital Neighborhoods Working Group held their 6th annual potluck in the park. The county held another training on Greenprint, a land use tool. And just this morning, the Metro Parks hosted 2 water taxi tours of the Cuyahoga, and the sewer district did a public square walk and talk. So that's just the last 2 weeks, and I'm sure I'm missing something, just to give you a sense of just all the activity that's going around this topic in Northeast Ohio. So green space projects, they really, I guess, continued to sprout throughout the year. The city installed 2 green roofs at Cleveland Hopkins Airport. Next time you're there, please check those out. Fleet Avenue was completed this year, along with a number of other projects that meet our Complete and Green Streets ordinance. And the city completed an assessment of all 150 plus parks, playgrounds, and green spaces, ranking them really in need of repair. This is similar to something we did for streets, also ranking streets in need of repair. We'll be investing in those parks, thanks to Issue 32, really starting with those most in need at about $5 million a year going forward. And many other exciting projects, really too many to name, made significant progress this year. Irishtown Bend, of course, you've seen that, and Case Western's new Greenway, just as a couple of great examples. So there's also plenty of partnerships that took hold or strengthened this year. So using an Ohio EPA grant awarded to our office, we've worked with many partners this past year to provide green infrastructure maintenance trainings. I know, not the sexiest topic, but it's crucially important. And just to kind of connect the previous summits, this was a kind of a gap we found early on a few years ago, is we're putting in more of this green infrastructure, but we got to make sure that people are skilled to maintain it. So the result over the last year or two was 21 trainings in 70 communities, and 391 municipal employees have received that training. So again, it's not just enough to build this stuff, we have to be able to maintain it. You really can't talk about green space without talking about trees. Cleveland has, about 100,000 less trees than we had half a century ago. These trees represent tens of millions of dollars in value associated with stormwater, air quality and public health, energy costs, property values, and so on. Trees have so much value. To make Cleveland the forest city once again, community-wide partnership is really the only solution. So the Cleveland Tree Plan was approved in 2016, and since then, the Tree Coalition has been working to implement that. So these 30 organizations in the coalition have been using a pretty comprehensive approach that focuses on data, policy, of course planting trees, but also maintaining them, Arbor Day celebrations and making each subsequent Arbor Day the biggest one ever, and much, much more. So, and also this year, we're excited to be bringing back leaf pickup in some high generation areas in the city. Even more so, those leaves are going to be composted and returned back to the soil. So we're really excited about that. And as of Arbor Day, the mayor announced on behalf of the entire coalition a goal of increasing our tree canopy from 19%, that's where it currently is, to 30% by 2040. And as part of that, I guess, early down payment, we're going to do 50,000 trees in the city by 2020. And really, all those partners are going to be working towards that goal. So just another example of partnership is Climate Smart Cities. So the Trust for Public Land has worked with the city, sewer district, and many partners to implement their Climate Smart Cities program. So this tool will help prioritize green infrastructure solutions across many factors, grouped into the categories you see here. So connect, cool, protect, and absorb. So in other words, how best do we connect our green spaces together? How do we prioritize green infrastructure to cool down those neighborhoods that really need it the most? How can we best use green space to protect better against severe weather? And finally, where should we invest to absorb stormwater and really help clean our lake? So we're really excited to be using this tool going forward to inform all of those decisions. And speaking of green infrastructure, we're excited to share the Sewer District has released the 2018 Green Infrastructure Grants Program, Request for Proposals. So to be considered for that, projects should remove stormwater from the combined sewer and also ensure long-term maintenance. So to date, NEO-RSD has provided almost $5 million, I believe, across 55 different grants. So these proposals are due October 23rd. There's also, I think, more info in the back on this grant opportunity. All right, so the second major theme I wanted to tee up is updating our climate action plan and how we integrate, especially equity, into all that work. At the heart of climate action in Cleveland is building thriving and healthy neighborhoods throughout the city. But of course, our local work here is impacted by what happens at the national and of course the global scale when we're talking about climate. This year, we watched the U.S. pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement. We are now one of only 2 countries whose federal government has rejected this agreement. So in the face of the climate crisis we are presented with, it has become clear that cities, counties and states, businesses and universities really must lead now more than ever. So in response, our mayor, along with mayors across the country, reaffirmed their commitment to the Paris Agreement. And I will just now read a statement from the climate mayors because I think it aligns pretty well with Cleveland's approach to addressing climate issues. So it says, "We will continue to lead. We are increasing investments in renewable energy and energy efficiency. We will buy and create more demand for electric cars and trucks. We will increase our efforts to cut greenhouse gas emissions, create a clean energy economy, and stand for environmental justice. And if the President wants to break the promises made to our allies enshrined in the historic Paris Agreement, we'll build and strengthen relationships around the world to protect the planet from devastating climate risks." So the city has been steadfast in its commitment to climate action for some time. All the way back in 2006, the mayor signed the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement, and a couple years ago, he signed onto the Compact of Mayors. So this map here, you can see, shows all those cities across the world who have signed on to that compact. 142 U.S. cities have signed this compact, and I'm happy to report today that we are one of the first 10 cities to demonstrate compliance with this compact. We are also one of 5 cities to win, thank you. We're also one of 5 cities to win a Climate Protection Award this year from the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So, this is because we not only established a goal, but we developed a plan to get there and have begun implementation and are also measuring our progress. So, the plan part. So back in 2013, our office convened a 50-member committee to create the Cleveland Climate Action Plan. This plan includes 33 actions that activate the Sustainable Cleveland celebration topics you saw earlier. So these actions were prioritized because they meet the triple bottom line of sustainability. So even if climate change didn't exist, which it clearly does, these actions, we would still implement them because they make sense from that triple bottom line perspective: people, planet, and profit. So here's those 33 actions broken into 6 focus areas. All 33 actions serve to either reduce our emissions or help us become more resilient to the impacts of climate change that we're already facing and are projected to get worse in the future. And of course, many actually do both. So I just want to give one example, and might as well start with action number 1 in the plan. It's really about weatherizing homes. So, weatherizing home reduces emissions because it reduces our energy use. At the same time, weatherization makes our homes more comfortable, and in turn, our residents more resilient to extreme weather. So, extreme heat, extreme cold, etc. And as I mentioned, we are measuring progress. And I will apologize in advance. This is going to get a little wonky, so please indulge me just for one slide, I promise. So comparing 2010 to 2015, we've seen about a 5% decrease in carbon emissions here in Cleveland. So why is that? This is mostly due to beginning to reduce our dependence on coal to power the electric grid, and also less natural gas use in our homes and businesses. We've also seen a slight decrease in transportation emissions, and this is most likely from having more efficient vehicles since 2010. At the same time, total industrial emissions have increased despite actually improvements in efficiency in those industrial operations. And so this overall increase is really from the increased economic activity we've seen since 2010. So now this is really a big deal because we're starting to see evidence of something here in Cleveland that we really need to see across the globe. And that's something that's called decoupling. So since the Industrial Revolution, and really before that, we've seen economic growth and emissions coupled. So in other words, when the economy goes up, emissions go up, and then when the economy goes down, emissions go down. With decoupling, like we're starting to see, economic activity goes up while emissions go down. So the numbers for 2016 look good as well. They're not final yet, but we expect further reductions in emissions while the economy continues to recover. So this really help us keep on track to meet our goal of 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Okay, that's it on the detailed numbers. I apologize. So of course there's much work to do, and many of the breakout topics on day 2 are climate actions where we really need to accelerate progress. At the same time, we are in the early stages of updating this plan. So where we are focused on, at this point, really those cross-cutting issues that affect every action, all 33 of those existing actions. So we're asking questions during this process like, which residents are most vulnerable to external shocks that climate change makes worse. So again, like things like heat waves, extreme cold, floods, etc. And how do we best use that knowledge to improve their resiliency? Or how do we prioritize actions in order to increase jobs in the green economy? And as Ron mentioned, how can local corporations and institutions support local climate action? And finally, how do we ensure that everything we do is examined with an equity lens? So this is challenging work, but fortunately we have a Climate Action Advisory Committee currently made up of 60 organizations, and I think even more, lending their expertise to the entire process. And we are all committed to ensuring that the benefits of becoming a sustainable city reach all people, no matter their age, their race, or the neighborhood they live in. So if you serve on that committee, if you don't mind, could you just please rise and be recognized for doing that hard work? Let's see if any Climate Action Advisory Committee. Thank you. So finally, the third overarching theme I want to touch on, and the mayor mentioned, is accelerating progress to 2019, the culmination of this 10-year initiative. We have a lot of accomplishments to hang our hat on. For example, better water quality has improved the health of our fish. You also may have seen river otters are back in the Cuyahoga River. We saw that this year. At the same time, economic activity and recreation associated with the river and lake has continued to increase. Air quality has improved. Ron mentioned we are on our way to completing the first freshwater offshore wind project in North America, and Cleveland is considered a national leader in moving towards a local food economy. But there's much work to do, and we are really well primed to, I'd say, accelerate that progress over the next 2 years and beyond. So that's what we're here to work on. I will now share a few more detailed examples of areas where we can build off the progress already being made. So first, let's look at cycling. We are on pace to install nearly 70 miles of bike infrastructure in just the last 4 years. Considering our city's size, I believe that's one of the fastest paces in the entire country. The overall goal is to provide cycling amenities in every single Cleveland neighborhood. And as you see, in 2016, we set a record for new bike infrastructure in the city. And this year, we're hoping to break that record. The result is a bike network that's starting to become more connected throughout the city. You know, and like all transformations, this change has required time and commitment from a lot of people, including the cycling community, NOACA, and a number of city departments, planning department, our capital projects department, streets, traffic engineering, and more. You know, last year our keynote, if you were here, Gil Penalosa, he talked of what's called the 8 to 80 cities approach. So that is, you know, designing streets so they work for everyone, really whether you're an 8-year-old or you're 80. And now, over the next year, we have an opportunity to move further in that direction with the creation of a Cuyahoga Greenway plan, as well as an update to the city's Bikeway Master Plan. And building off the Midway work and the Midway plan that was completed this year, we'll look across the city to prioritize which bike lanes should have, you know, more of a physical barrier between, you know, basically cyclists and cars, improving safety for everyone. So solar, you know, while progress on renewable energy depends in no small part on state policy, which those of you who work in solar can well appreciate, there's still a lot we can do locally on this. So I'm pleased to announce, as of Monday, Cleveland is a certified SolSmart community at the bronze level. This essentially means that we are committed to reducing the cost of going solar on homes and businesses. So, for example, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be posting a solar guide that clarifies the process, really for building owners as well as solar installers, on how to go solar, you know, from A to Z, and specifically when the city is involved in that process, you know, how that works, and to really clarify that. We also have nothing in our zoning code that explicitly limits solar, which some communities do have. And the county led a great solar co-op program resulting in about 200 solar leads, so people really interested in putting solar on their roofs, and about 40 of those turned into actual installations. So, you know, how do we really take this work to the next level over the next couple years? You know, and more businesses are publicly sharing their sustainability progress, which indicates they care. Essentially, all business types can report through organizations like the Global Reporting Initiative, the Carbon Disclosure Project, or get certified as a benefits corporation, also known as a B Corp. You know, other certifications are, I'd say, specific to different sectors. So you have ones like Dine Green. So restaurants can get certified green through this process. And little known, the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association has a green certification for law firms. And they have over 30 law firms actually certified through that process. Specific to transportation, businesses can also become certified bicycle-friendly businesses. But there's still a lot of businesses, and I would especially say small businesses, where none of these really are the best fit in terms of getting external recognition, but also tools to support them. So one of the breakouts on day 2 tomorrow will focus on creating a local green business certification or recognition program. So similar to ones that Dayton has and Columbus has something as well. That's really accessible for every business, no matter where they are in their sustainability journey, or if they haven't even started. So who knows, maybe, you know, by 2019, we can go from about 80 organizations certified green now to maybe more than 500. And I think that is a reasonable goal. Before I close, let's go back to 2009 and the first summit. So you can see here, It's our first chief, Andrew Watterson. On the left there's the mayor addressing the crowd, not looking a day older. And below him in that snappy gray suit, that's Freddie Collier, our planning director. He's clearly planning something there. And back then, in years since, every year, right, we've seen 2019 as a type of milestone year. And we've been working hard to ensure that we have that great story to tell on the 50th anniversary of the infamous fire. So yes, June 22nd, 2019 is an anniversary, but it's also a deadline. 2019 is also a great reason to throw a party in celebration of Cleveland and how far we've come. And we know how to throw a celebration when we set our mind to it. So for example, I just have a few here. This is the 1936-1937 Great Lakes Expo. Our city's bicentennial in 1996. It was a massive event. And we even included something called Baywatch on the River for folks who were around back then. If you have a free moment, I recommend Googling this. It's pretty amazing to watch. And actually, Baywatch is back, so we can recreate this again. And who could forget just last year, the sight of J.R. Smith celebrating shirtless, or the RNC taking over our city for an entire week. So yes, Cleveland knows how to throw a party. And now 2019. The mayor laid out the vision in his welcoming remarks. It's now up to us as a community to amaze the world with our continuing transformation to this green city on a blue lake. So, on June 22nd, 2019, we need to come together in a big way to celebrate our success, defend the laws that helped enable them, and scale up our progress. And we will do this with two primary ways. So as he mentioned, we're going to establish this 2019 steering committee of community leaders to help make that 50th anniversary weekend the largest sustainability event of that year in the entire country. And number two, we will support every organization and neighborhood in Cleveland so they have their own story to tell in 2019. So the 50th anniversary and the culmination of this 10-year initiative can be a watershed event in Cleveland's history, but really only if we are all in. So I'm looking forward to the next day and a half as we really help set the stage for the next 2 years and beyond. So finally, speaking of celebration, this year we've been marking the 100th anniversary of the creation of the Metro Parks. We're now going to play the Metro Parks Centennial video. I think it's about 5 minutes in length. And after that's over, Joe Rozak, Chief Operating Officer of the Metro Parks, will share some remarks before introducing our keynote speaker. So thank you very much.
At the turn of the century, William A. Stinchcomb, a Cleveland city engineer, had a vision for what was then the 6th largest city in the nation. His mission of establishing a ring of parks surrounding the Cleveland metropolitan area was formalized on July 23, 1917. What began with a 3-acre plot of land is now one of Northeast Ohio's most treasured assets, committed to the original mission of conservation, education, and recreation. By 1929, Cleveland Metropolitan Park District consisted of 9,000 acres and is organized into 9 reservations. The impact of the Park District continued to increase as the years passed with the introduction of the Naturalist Program and Trailside Museums. As the Park District grew, so did new opportunities for fulfilling the mission: expansion of golf courses, introduction of toboggan chutes, and ownership of the zoo. Cleveland Metro Parks continues to have a significant impact on the community, now spanning over 23,000 acres, with more than 300 miles of trails, 8 golf courses, 8 lakefront parks, and a nationally acclaimed zoo, which collectively attract nearly 18 million recreational visits annually. The strength of the Cleveland Metro Parks earned the organization the celebrated Gold Medal Award from the National Recreation and Park Association 4 times in recent years. As Cleveland Metro Parks looks ahead to the next 100 years of growth and beyond, it guides itself by Cleveland Metro Parks 2020, the Emerald Necklace Centennial Plan. The plan is based on 5 strategic goals: protection, relevancy, connections, come out and play, and organizational sustainability. Over the past 4 years, the Park District has acquired nearly 1,000 acres of quality wetlands, streams, and forests, ultimately lowering regional stormwater management costs by more than $5 million annually. Cleveland Metro Park Zoo has contributed more than $6 million to wildlife conservation efforts. This year, the zoo brought that work to the forefront with a new identity and brand focused on securing a future for wildlife. A Trust for Public Land study identified Cleveland Metro Parks trails and parks as key economic drivers that contribute at least $855 million annually in economic benefits to Northeast Ohio. Today, more than 57% of households without a vehicle are within a half-mile walk of our park entrances. Partnership on the Cleveland Foundation Centennial Lake Link Trail and the opening of the Edgewater Beach House are just two recent projects focused on connecting neighborhoods and increasing access to the parks and Lake Erie. By offering the community diverse recreation and nature education programs like hiking, mountain biking, birding, stand-up paddleboarding, kayaking, snowshoeing, and cross-country skiing, more than 700,000 people across 47 diverse communities have been served by Cleveland Metro Parks Outdoor Experiences Division over the past 3 years. The reclamation of Cleveland's lakefront has created a destination of our parks and beaches that border Lake Erie, attracting over 8 million visitors in the past 4 years. Cleveland Metro Parks continues to build upon the past century of growth to strengthen the community for future generations. Projects on the horizon include the Valley Parkway Connector Trail will fill a missing link in the Emerald Necklace to create a continuous 32-mile all-purpose trail starting in Rocky River Reservation in Lakewood, continuing through to Brecksville Reservation. Work is underway to construct a new fishing pier at Euclid Beach, which will provide an improved experience, accessibility, and safety in a design that honors the park's history as an amusement park. Cleveland Metro Park Zoo will break ground on the new Asian Highlands exhibit later this year. This new exhibit will provide expanded habitats for the red panda, snow leopard, and Amur leopard, with an increased focus on securing a future for these endangered species. Work continues on Reconnecting Cleveland projects, which earned the coveted Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery grant and will connect urban communities to park amenities through a variety of trails and bikeways. Be a part of the next century by supporting the Centennial Forests Fund and help us preserve forested ecosystems so they can continue to provide benefits to wildlife and future generations. Committed to providing essential environmental, economic, and community benefits, Cleveland Metro Parks is excited by the boundless opportunities for growth in Cleveland.
Wow, 100 years, that gives a lot of people the chills when they watch it, and gives me the shakes because I had to make all of that happen. And a lot of that happened in the last 5 years, which is hard to believe. The biggest question I get about our centennial celebration is not about what we've done, it's what are we going to do? What are the next 100 years going to be like for the Cleveland Metro Parks and green space in general in Cleveland? And Brian, our CEO at the event at Edgewater, put it very, very basically. We're going to put the Cleveland back in Cleveland Metro Parks. When William Stinchcomb designed that system as the 6th largest city, it was supposed to expand up to where the current park system is. Well, when the city stopped growing, it's ended up in the suburbs. So our goal now is to connect back into Cleveland, like Rivergate Park, Cleveland Foundation Centennial Trail Lake Link, the Red Line Greenway, and being part of projects like that can even shorten that half-mile distance for everybody and make our parks open and accessible to everybody. I'd like to thank Mayor Jackson and Matt Gray for inviting the Metro Parks to be a part of this. Our pillars are recreation, education, and conservation. And it's hard not to talk about conservation on the worldwide scale without talking about our keynote speaker. Mark Tursek is president and CEO of the Nature Conservancy, the global conservation organization known for its intense focus on collaboration and getting things done for the benefit of people and nature. He is the author of the Washington Post and Publishers Weekly best-selling book, Nature's Fortune: How Business and Society Thrive by Investing in Nature. A former managing director and partner for Goldman Sachs, where he spent 24 years, Mark brings deep business experience to his role leading the Conservancy. He is a champion of the idea of natural capital, valuing nature for its own sake, as well as the services it provides for people such as clean air and water, productive soils, and a stable climate. Mark's leadership of the Nature Conservancy has been profiled in The New Yorker, Bloomberg Business Week, The Wall Street Journal, The Atlantic, and Delta's Sky magazine. It's my pleasure to welcome back home Mark Tercek.
Thanks to Mayor Jackson and Matt Gray for inviting me to be here and speak with all of you today. Thanks to Ron Richard and the Cleveland Foundation for being the big sponsor of this event, along with all the other sponsors. Thank you, Joe, for that very nice introduction. Thanks to everyone in Cleveland, citizens, community groups, environmental organizations, business, you name it, for supporting Cleveland's efforts to be a green city on a blue lake. Today I want to talk about two topics. First, I want to discuss how nature-based solutions can make places like Cleveland great places to live. Second, I want to talk about the need for bold leadership. What I've learned in my time at the Nature Conservancy, we call it TNC for short, is that making the case for investing in nature will only take us so far. What's even more important, far more important, is for individuals and organizations to think big, to step up, and to follow their moral compass. That means all of you. But first, let me just tell you a little bit about me and about TNC so you'll know where I'm coming from. I'm really happy to be here today. As you heard, I grew up right here on the east side of Cleveland in Collinwood. I spent a lot of time outdoors as a kid, but it wasn't at nature preserves. I shoveled snow, shot hoops, I delivered the Cleveland Plain Dealer. In fact, here I am. Not really. I liked being outside, of course, but it wasn't these experiences that made me an environmentalist. My grandparents were all immigrants from Slovenia. When they settled in Cleveland, they planted many fruit trees and a big garden. It was my job to weed the garden and pick the fruit. But that's not why this memory stands out for me. In the late 60s, I remember very vividly, the trees suddenly stopped producing good fruit. Some of the trees even weakened and died. Even as a kid, it was pretty easy for me to see the likely culprit. I can still picture the smog that covered the city. Then, in 1969, as we all know, the Cuyahoga River famously caught fire. Now, you don't need to be an environmentalist to know that something is terribly wrong when a river bursts into flames. Some of you might remember the show Laugh-In. It was the Saturday Night Live of that time. I'll never forget the show's running jokes about the fire. It was embarrassing to Clevelanders. Even as a kid, I didn't like it. Those events opened my eyes, and they opened a lot of people's eyes. In fact, there's a silver lining to this story. The river burning, the bad air, the water pollution in cities, not just Cleveland, but Pittsburgh nearby, LA, all across the country, these all gave rise to the greatest period of environmental progress in U.S. history. Under President Nixon, we got the EPA, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Endangered Species Act. None of this was easy. There was very strong opposition to all of these measures. Take the Clean Air Act, for example. The auto industry railed against it. It would destroy millions of jobs, they said. It would cost billions of dollars. But Congress, under great pressure from the public, again, that means you, our predecessors, Congress enacted the bill anyway, and President Nixon signed it into law. And guess what happened? Right afterwards, American science and American industry got to work, and good things happened. The catalytic converter was invented. We shifted to unleaded gasoline. Today, thanks mainly to the Clean Air Act, cars are 99% cleaner than they were in 1970. That's why we can all breathe cleaner air as we enjoy blue skies over our cities, as we are here today. There's an encouraging takeaway from this story. We can build environmental progress out of challenging times. We did it then. We can do it again today. So, how did I get from Cleveland to TNC? After college, I got a job on Wall Street where I spent 24 years as an investment banker. Two things happened along the way. First, my wife, Amy, and she's from Ohio too, we're city people. but we made a real effort as parents to connect our 4 kids to nature. It was a bit late in our life, but we started taking nature trips to nature preserves, spending times outdoors, etc., and that turned me into an environmentalist. In fact, I think that story helps me understand there's an inner environmentalist in everyone. We just have to uncover that in some people. Second, as a business person, I developed the view, and I still believe this today, that business can be a force for good. As a result, late in my career on Wall Street, I jumped at the opportunity to lead Goldman Sachs' first environmental initiative. My job was to look for win-win opportunities where businesses could improve both their bottom line and environmental outcomes. I didn't have to look very far. Everywhere I looked, I discovered these kinds of win-wins. They were far more common than people thought. By early 2008, I was ready for more. When I heard that TNC was looking for a new CEO, I threw my hat in the ring. Nobody expected they would hire someone from Wall Street, but lo and behold, I got the job. It was the happiest day in my career. So that's my story. Let me briefly introduce you to TNC and explain a little bit about who we are and what we do. For more than 65 years now, we've been known as a pragmatic, nonpartisan conservation organization. We bring diverse groups together to advance progress. That approach allowed us to be become the largest conservation organization in the world. Today we have some 4,000 people on our staff. We work in each of the 50 states and in another 72 countries all around the world. We started as a U.S.-based land trust, buying land to protect it. But as threats to nature became more complex, we realized this strategy would only take us so far. So we moved into new areas like marine, freshwater, and climate change. And we began prioritizing conservation solutions that benefit people as well as nature. Excuse me. Here in Ohio, we've got a great team, and you can see some of TNC's strategies at work. We've protected in Ohio some 60,000 acres of land across the state. Most recently, we acquired Snow Lake in Geauga County. It's just east of Cleveland. It's one of the state's best remaining glacial wetlands, and next year we plan to open it to the public. We're working with farmers across the state to minimize nutrient runoff to ensure that Lake Erie and the Ohio River provide clean water for communities. More recently, we partnered with Ohio's congressional delegation to secure full funding for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And we're doing all we can to make the case that clean energy policies are good for Ohioans. I'm not going to talk a lot about our work in Ohio, but some of my colleagues are here. You can chat with them at the reception. Can you guys just wave? I see Josh Knights, who leads our chapter, some of his team. Get to know these folks later. They're doing a great job here in Ohio. Now, as we expanded these kinds of strategies all around the world, we realized there was one more important area where we needed to focus our attention: cities. So we recently started a cities program. It's new, but it's off to a great start. In just 2.5 years, we're now already working in some 25 cities. Some folks weren't sold on our cities initiative at first. Why take on a new priority so different than what we've done before, they asked. Well, here's our answer. First, cities need nature. Nature can help solve some of the biggest challenges facing cities today. Second, nature needs cities. More than half the world's population lives in cities today, and soon that will be 3/4. We need those people on nature's side, so we want to do work where the people live. To me, it's a no-brainer. By bringing nature into cities, we can help people and nature thrive together. We can make cities better places to live, and we can build a stronger and more diverse base for our cause. So that's why I'm here today. I was delighted to be invited by the mayor and Matt Gray. I'm super impressed by the great work underway in Cleveland. Congratulations to all of you on everything you've accomplished, and best luck to all of you on reaching your ambitious goals. As a former Clevelander, it warms my heart. I want to talk about some of the challenges facing cities today and how we think nature can solve them. We all know there are plenty of issues facing cities. I want to focus on 3: heat and air pollution, clean water, and human impact. We should have a slide here, I think. Perfect. Let's start with heat and air, okay? One of the consequences of concrete and asphalt infrastructure is urban heat. It's much hotter in cities than in surrounding areas. We all know that. Heat turns out to be the #1 natural disaster killer in the U.S., and the problem's only going to get worse as the climate changes. In Los Angeles, for example, there used to be about 8 days a year where the temperature would be in excess of 95 degrees. That's expected to triple over the years ahead. In addition, polluted air is causing health problems for Americans. Every mayor I meet brings this up right away, as soon as we start talking about the city. The World Health Organization reported this year that 92% of all people are breathing some form of bad urban air. This causes serious health consequences like asthma and heart disease. What can cities do to minimize the consequences of urban heat and air pollution? Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much. It's that air. Just kidding. What can cities be doing to minimize the consequences of urban heat and air pollution? Well, you can see for yourself right here in Cleveland. And of course, I'm talking about the very successful Cleveland Tree Project. We think this is great. Science tells us that vegetation, trees, shrubs, urban gardens can be one of the best and most cost-effective solutions to heat and air quality challenges. Trees cool the air by casting shade and releasing water vapor. And they can remove up to 35% of pollutants in the air around a tree. In other words, trees have a direct impact on cities' air quality and temperature. The more trees, the greater the benefit. At TNC, we know planting trees in urban areas is a great strategy, but of course, we also know decision makers need evidence to make big investments. So last year, we undertook a massive study, and we published the results in our Planning Healthy Air report. You can get this online. The goal of the report is to determine the return on investment for planting urban trees. We overlaid maps of tree cover in 245 cities against areas where we knew the air quality is bad. We found that investing just $4 per resident on trees could improve the health of millions of people. The report gives you all the details. Now we're expanding this work. Our newest report comes out tomorrow. We're calling it Funding Trees for Health. It tackles some of the obstacles cities face in getting a tree planting strategy up and running. This connection between nature and health is something that we're exploring more and more, and we're really getting excited about. It's a way to get more people on our side. Take Louisville, Kentucky, for example. Louisville has some of the worst air quality in the U.S. Asthma and heart diseases are big problems for the city, and both are linked to bad air quality. So TNC, along with some 60 partner organizations, we don't ever do anything by ourselves. So we've started something called the Green Heart Study. The idea is to green up a neighborhood by planting trees and shrubs and compare the health of its residents to those in non-green areas. We're leaving the medical expertise to the University of Louisville, who will help us quantify as precisely as we can the health benefits of planting trees. We're really pleased we've got a grant from the National Institute of Health, the NIH, for this research, and we think this is a great way to make the case of showing the benefits of bringing trees and nature into cities. Now let me talk about water. Water quality is another major worry for cities. Stormwater is the fastest growing source of water pollution. When unfiltered rain pounds down on pavement, it collects pollutants. With nowhere to go, it flows into our rivers, lakes, and oceans. I'll use D.C. as an example, my home for the last 9 years. The state of stormwater runoff in Washington, D.C. is not great. For every 1 inch of rain, some 525 million gallons of polluted water enter the Anacostia River alone. That's the size of something like 800 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Even worse, when stormwater and sewer systems are combined, as they are in many U.S. cities, including D.C., big storms can cause overflows that send raw sewage into our nearby waterways. So what can cities do to address the problem of stormwater without breaking the bank? These programs have to make economic sense. I'm sure most of you know, because you're doing it here in Cleveland, the benefits of green infrastructure, like rain gardens, bioswales, and restored wetlands. These features soak up stormwater, they slow it down before it reaches overburdened sewer systems. They also add valuable green space to neighborhoods, and they create jobs for the construction and the maintenance that goes with these projects. So, how can we take these nature-based solutions to scale? Let me return to DC. Like many cities, DC now mandates that developers retain stormwater runoff from their properties. What's unique about DC's regulations is that it allows developers to use off-site green infrastructure solutions as well. In DC, developers can meet up to half of their stormwater retention requirements by buying credits from projects built all across the city. Right now, DC is the only city that allows developers to do this. This system allowed TNC to raise money from institutional investors to build green infrastructure projects. These projects generate credits that developers can then purchase to meet their stormwater retention requirements. We think these projects like this, will be a big win for everyone in DC, and we'd like to see this happen across the country. First, these projects will protect our local waterways, the Anacostia and Potomac rivers and the Chesapeake Bay. Second, they'll create more green space in underserved neighborhoods. Third, they'll ease financial burdens on tight government budgets, and local ratepayers. And fourth, they'll create returns from investors from the sale of the credits, attracting even more capital for work of this nature. We think we can really take this strategy to scale. We're eager to work with cities and investors and developers all around the country. Okay, then, we can't talk about these challenges, of course, without also talking about the impact on people. As more and more people move to cities, it's on us to develop urban areas where people can thrive. Today, we're more disconnected than ever from nature, I'm sorry to report. The statistics tell us that the average kid in the U.S. spends less than 30 minutes of unstructured outdoor time per week, but up to 7 hours of screen time per day. This is a challenge. Quite different from the way I grew up right here in Cleveland. Today's average high school seniors can identify some 1,000 commercial brands, but less than 10 native plants. TNC really doesn't have the solution for getting kids to put down their iPhones, but we do have programs that can help connect youth with nature at the local level, and I know you guys do here in Cleveland too. Thank you. Dying. One of our programs is a high school internship program that we call LEAF, for Leaders in Environmental Action for the Future. We've been doing this now for 22 years. LEAF provides paid opportunities for teens to get involved with local conservation programs. We recruit a diverse group of high school students, and we open their eyes to career possibilities in the environmental field, and we just connect them to nature. It's really working. Over the past 20 years, 1 in 3 of our LEAF graduates has gone on to pursue an environmental career, and more than half volunteer for environmental causes. So we really can do something about this. For too long, nature's been viewed as a nice-to-have, parks and recreation type option. We need it to be viewed as essential infrastructure. We're making good progress, but it's just the beginning. We need more and better evidence to make the case, and we need more leaders and citizens willing to step up and invest in nature. So now I want to shift gears and talk about the how behind these big plans for sustainable cities. If you're here today, you get it. You're taking the first step or more. Thank you for coming and supporting the Sustainable Cleveland. There's great work going on here, and it's obviously getting lots of backing from all of you. We can develop all the plans in the world, but without leadership at the local level, the Cleveland level, it's not going to work. We won't get success. There are many ways for you to approach this leadership. I want to leave you with some thoughts on a few of those. Let me take a step back. 9 years ago, I left Wall Street to join the Nature Conservancy. I came to TNC guns blazing, convinced that business-like, investment-oriented approaches were exactly what the environmental movement needed. I even wrote a book on investing in nature. I thought we could solve almost every environmental problem using tried and true market tools. I wasn't really wrong. We're employing a lot of those strategies, and they're going very well. Yet I now understand something that's much more important. Economic arguments will only take us so far. What we really need are bold leaders, bold people, willing to stick up, stick their necks out, and lead from the heart. That's what I want to challenge all of you to do. Now, in my job, when I say this, people often say in response, I get how someone like you can make a big difference. You're the CEO of an environmental group. But what can I do? I love when people ask that question. My answer, of course, is there's a lot each and every one of you can do. There's no shortage of ways you can make a difference. I want to go over 3 of these areas: leadership at home, in politics, and in your neighborhood. First, let's talk about leadership at home. As parents, uncles, aunts, grandparents, neighbors, and in many other ways, you can help young people build a conservation ethic. We need to do this. Remember, kids are indoors and glued to their screens. Please, help connect young people with nature. Take kids outside. Teach them about why it's so important to protect the lands and waters that sustain us. Help kids see the roles they can play in keeping cities clean and safe. Teach them about recycling and composting, and not just in terms of chores. Talk to them about the impact of reducing waste. One way to do this, I think, is to pull back the curtain on the work that goes into providing resources like fresh drinking water. Kids are interested in this stuff. Schedule a tour of a local plant. I was really kind of psyched to see that one of the sponsors of this event, Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer, offers tours of their plants that are open to the public. It's easy for me to imagine young kids enjoying that. Second, let's shift gears now and talk about leadership in the political space. This is critical. Ask yourself, are you doing everything you can as a citizen to show your government leaders that you care about a resilient future for people and the planet? This can be tough. Every day I see a new headline about how divided we are as a country. Well, democracy is a participation sport. We all need to engage here. I really believe that finding common ground and engaging in political discourse is more important than ever. I encourage you to draw on principles that everyone can agree on: clean water, clean air, food security. Everybody's for that. These are common ground principles that make it into every political speech on both sides of the aisle. But more importantly, they're real issues that affect people across the country. And we're close to real solutions. And importantly, please, speak up about the risks of climate change. Your representatives are listening. Whenever I talk to leaders in Congress, they all tell me, and I believe this, hearing from you makes the biggest difference. Also, emphatically, importantly, vote. Too few people vote. Now, this may sound obvious, and you're all engaged people, you probably all vote, but we need everybody to show up. We need to show leaders the initiatives that we care about, and we need to make sure they prioritize the environment. Finally, let's talk about leadership in your neighborhood. What can you do to make Cleveland a more vibrant and green space to live? Well, you know more about this than me, but I'll point to a few projects. Many of these are supported by leaders in this room. By 2019, as Ron mentioned, you can look forward to the first freshwater offshore wind project in North America, right here on Lake Erie. It's so cool. Please support it. And as you heard from Matt, you're currently updating the Cleveland Climate Action Plan with more focus on equity, green jobs, and resilience. Between 2010 and 2015, Cleveland's emissions have already fallen by something like 5% while you achieved economic growth. Pretty impressive for a manufacturing state still dependent to a large degree on coal. Climate action at the state and city level is more important than ever, and it can help pave the way for stronger action at the federal level. So kudos to all of you on your leadership here, and please keep it up. You're also continuing to grow the Cleveland Climate Action Fund. It's already supported 25 resident-led, neighborhood-based projects over the last few years. And going back to my earlier point about the importance of urban trees, I'm hugely encouraged by the success of the Cleveland Tree Plan. You're on track to plant 50,000 new trees by 2020. If any of these projects sound interesting to you, I bet they all do, please get involved. Make a difference. Roll up your sleeves. Show the way forward. I urge you also to look beyond Cleveland. You know that old saying, think global, act local? It's no longer enough. Today's big environmental challenges require action by all of you at all levels. So keep up the great work here at home, but let's do all we can also to push for state, federal, and global leadership on the environment too. Okay, let me wrap up. When I look around the room, I met a bunch of you beforehand. I know you're all ready to accomplish important work. You're motivated by opportunities to make a big difference. So I encourage you to think very hard about what you can do to champion the idea of vibrant green spaces and sustainable cities. You don't need to accept gray infrastructure as the way it is. It's time to make nature an indispensable strategy so that our cities are sustainable, future-proof, and great places to live. Let's get to work. Thank you very much. Matt says, kindly, we have time for a few questions or comments or challenges, if there are any. Don't be shy. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for joining us here in Cleveland today. I appreciated your comments on engaging in politics, but it seems more and more over the years environmental policies have become more controversial and polarizing. So I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for how we bridge that gap and unify both parties?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I didn't really know much about politics before I got this job. And then, you know, we've obviously been paying attention, and we see all these challenges, especially at the federal level. And so in the United States, the Nature Conservancy said, boy, what are we going to do about this? And we're kind of interestingly organized for this challenge. We have, I told you about our Ohio chapter. We have a chapter in every state. So we're organized just like Congress. So we've got blue states, we've got red states. Each of our chapters have boards of trustees. They're great people of all stripes, you know, urban, rural, young, old, business people, academics, volunteers, you name it. Diverse group of people with a few things in common. They care about nature, they respect science, they want to make progress. We're also nonpartisan, so we have as many, we call those volunteer leaders our trustees. We have as many Republicans as Democrats. And so then we said a few years ago now, we would like to launch a 50-state climate initiative. And we never did this before, we require every one of our state chapters to have an explicit climate strategy. Now, in some states, it's kind of easy. You know, California, Massachusetts, these are blue states, left-leaning ones, very much on our side. Good for them. We don't take that for granted. But we're also in states like Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, Oklahoma, where these are tougher issues. Or we're states like Ohio, manufacturing states that have been dependent on coal. So there was a lot of concern about how will we make progress. What we're finding, though, is if we, rather than begin by talking about things we disagree with, even within our family of TNC, if we instead start with goals we share in common, things we can agree on, and make an effort to find common ground, we can make a lot of progress. So when we started this initiative, there was great nervousness. There was more than nervousness. There was criticism of me saying, you're going to blow up TNC. This is a bad idea. I said, no, I don't think so, but we're going to be respectful, inclusive, we're going to listen, and those kinds of corny approaches that you learn as a little kid really do work. So then in June, we had what we call Advocacy Day on Capitol Hill. So we had something like 250 meetings with senators, congressmen, and congresswomen. We had a meeting with every senator and congressman and congresswoman with a TNC trustee from their state and their party, talking about climate, pragmatic ways to address climate, protecting the science in the budget, protecting the EPA, et cetera. And the trustees were engaged, the people on the Congress listened. So I just think we need to do more of that kind of work. Find common ground, Resist the urge to criticize and vilify. There are bad actors there, I know, but rather than start there, I think it's more pragmatic to find those areas where there can be some agreement and progress. It will take hard work, but we've got to do all that stuff. And then, I'm repeating myself now in my speech, people really need to do things like vote at all levels and get involved. I think Americans have gotten a little bit complacent about democracy and politics, and maybe some of this recent tough news will be a good wake-up call for us all, and we'll all get more engaged. And if we do so, I think there's some room for optimism. And there's one other important thing to say. You can get discouraged when you look at federal politics right now. But I find as soon as I shift my attention to the state level or the city level, like in Cleveland today, I'm super encouraged because you see all kinds of people. I bet this is a diverse group of people here today in terms of politics and other parts of your background. But you're smart people, you care about your city, you want it to be a great place to live and a sustainable place, so you put your differences aside, come together to work and get things done. I think that's the spirit we need going forward. What else? Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your words today, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about some of the internal policies and strategies that TNC has, either driven from the top or leadership management, or driven from some of your state offices around sustainability. Thanks.
Thank you. So we try to do it two ways. We're a little bit top-down in some respects in terms of setting strategy. But we also want to be bottoms up because, I mentioned our great Ohio chapter. Many of our best ideas emerge from the local teams. Just have great ideas, then we try to take them to scale. And then, I'll be repeating myself probably a little bit, but we look for common ground. So there are bad actors out there, and there are good environmental organizations whose role it is to campaign against those bad actors. That's important work. It benefits all of us. It benefits TNC. But we don't do that. We rather try to be an organization that brings people together. And how do we do that? We base our work to the greatest extent possible on good science and good evidence. We try to be inclusive, so we're nonpartisan. We try to pay close attention to economics. It seems to us we'll get much more accomplished if we champion strategies that make business sense. This is true around the world. We understand that people have lots of concerns. They need livelihoods. They want economic growth so their kids can have good futures, et cetera. So we want to factor those kinds of consideration into our planning. We believe in partnership. I noted quickly we don't do anything by ourselves. We are huge believers in the benefits of collaboration, and we're huge beneficiaries of that kind of collaboration. In the city sphere, we're new. We know we're new, so we're humble. We think we bring some valuable expertise and experience about nature and investments in nature at scale. But when it comes to getting things done in cities, we're the rookies, so we need to partner well. This is the kind of spirit of TNC, which I think makes us an effective organization, and it makes me really proud to be on the team. Thank you. Oh, here's one over here.
The emergence of climate change has obviously changed the nature of conservation. Just holding a natural area and assuming that it will remain as it has been is clearly no longer an equally effective strategy. Could you just describe TNC's sort of evolution towards embracing energy and climate issues in the wake of that understanding?
Yeah, thank you for asking. It's been a big part of my work and my time at TNC, and I'm really proud of the organization. I don't know if this will sound like a no-brainer or easy to you or what, but TNC historically was an organization that saw the benefits of being nonpartisan and saw the benefits of being inclusive, and so tended to shy away from super contentious issues, thinking that's not a way to grow this big nonpartisan organization. But as I said, we're science-based, and so then in the past few years we said, look, from a science perspective, this is a no-brainer. Climate change is threat number one. It threatens not only to undo all the things we want to do in the future. It's going to upset everything we've accomplished over our 65-year history. So we said, after lots of careful consultation with everybody on our team and all of our supporters and our trustees, we came out of that process saying climate change is threat number one, so therefore addressing climate change will be priority number one for the Nature Conservancy. So this was a big deal for us. And you know, in Cleveland, I don't know if that seems like such a big deal, but again, we have chapters in places like, I mentioned them, Mississippi, Louisiana. It hasn't been historically easy to talk about climate change in those states. There are a lot of headwinds, and so our organization has had to step up to make this work. I'm really pleased, though, by the progress. I think we're demonstrating you can address climate change. You can even talk about climate change in ways that don't have to be so partisan and critical, but rather, again, science-based, pragmatic, economically sensible ways to make progress. So that's a big part of our work. And then a second big strategy we have in mind, it's way too early to brag, but it's a super big priority for us, is we think nature itself can be an enormous solution for the climate challenge. So if you think about the Paris Climate Accord, it is embarrassing, as Matt said, only the U.S. and Syria are not any longer members of that group. We'll come back, we'll deal with that. But anyway, if you think about the ambitious, I think noble goals of the Paris Climate Accord and the emission reductions that will have to occur, we think fully 1/3 of that can be accomplished on a cost-effective basis by restoring nature at scale all around the world. Forests will be the most important opportunity, but virtually all ecosystems absorb and sequester carbon. And we think it can be done cost-effectively. And if we can get humankind around the world to do that, there are a lot of co-benefits too. Old-fashioned biodiversity benefits, habitat for wildlife, water benefits, community benefits. So we're really focused on this. It's going to take, though, some good business thinking because there's not enough philanthropy in the world to do this. So we'll need business models, timber-related, agriculture-related, to do this, and we'll need better government policy to do this at scale. But anyway, the Nature Conservancy is focused on climate change as a science-based organization. It's threat number one. It's not the only thing we're doing, but we're at it. And I'm proud to say we're showing, I believe, you can do that in a common sense, nonpartisan, inclusive way. Thanks for asking that.
Here.
Thanks for your presentation, Matt. And I'm hearing very clearly your emphasis on on environmental issues, including climate change, as something that should be bringing us together because of this is common ground. It should be common ground. And also thinking in terms of the retrospective of how the narrative around environmental issues has evolved from where it was kind of a luxury to where we've heard the argument that it makes good economic sense, is good business to protect the environment, to now talking about these should be issues that represent the common ground. But what I haven't heard is a lot of the language around clean air, clean water, healthy, toxic-free environments being a basic human right. And especially, as we're seeing what's happening down south in Puerto Rico and so forth, my question for you is, along the lines of a strategy of trying to find this common ground, do you see a prospect in talking about environmental protection as a basic right, especially when we're talking about, the Earth's life support system, the very things that sustain us? Shouldn't, if anything is a basic human right, shouldn't it be clean air, clean water, and toxic-free environments?
Yes. Well, thank you for asking. I certainly agree with the premise of your question that this should be a basic human right for all people. Whether that's the best way to make progress in the dialogue about all the environmental challenges we face, I really don't know. You can tell from how I'm talking about environmental challenges, you're hearing how at the Nature Conservancy we're addressing these topics. For us, I think we're using arguments and examples and strategies that kind of play to our strength. And I see lots of reason to be optimistic that we're going to make some real progress that way. We are. But I don't suggest that it's the only way. I'm in the Let a Thousand Flowers Bloom camp. This is hard. You can make an argument that addressing climate change is the hardest challenge humankind has ever had to address, in that it's global, that we have free rider issues, there are all these inequities of terms of historic emissions, et cetera. This is just plain tough. And so we've got a set of strategies and ways of pursuing this that give us some optimism, cautious optimism. But we don't ever pretend that we're always right or we've got all the answers. And I think the comments you made are compelling and also deserve to be loudly proclaimed. Wait for one more, but I'm going to tell one little story. When I got here, I was taking some photos. I have 4 brothers. And if I'm not mistaken, on this stage in 1969, I was sitting out there with my dad. He wouldn't let me come by myself. I saw the Led Zeppelin Grand Funk Railroad concert in Cleveland. One of my best memories. And here I am, right where Jimmy Page was probably standing. Okay, sorry. You can pick. I can't really see so well.
Who wants to?
Oh, any last question? There's one over here. Here, we have one here from the. We'll go over here to you guys too. Go ahead, ma'am.
Young person.
Oh.
Thank you.
We should get this lady in too, just to be polite.
All right.
Fast. Just go fast.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. In an effort to make cities more sustainable, is the Nature Conservancy looking at ways to better equip cities or coastal communities for natural disasters and climate change?
Thank you for asking about that. I actually should have put that in my speech. So an enormous opportunity in our view is another aspect of green infrastructure, if you will, is the risks that cities, mostly cities, face from rising sea levels and storms. So many cities are on coastlines. And Hurricane Sandy, I was a New Yorker for a long time, was really a vivid and bad experience. But right after Hurricane Sandy, to their credit, Governor Cuomo and at the time Mayor Bloomberg put together a task force, mostly of engineering types. The question was, how will we protect New York from future Sandys? But they put me and one other environmentalist on that task force. We argued, and we had good science showing that investments in coastal ecosystems can be a superb investment opportunity, a low-cost way to provide protection from these kinds of storms. And that's getting a lot of traction all over the world. So, in our world, sometimes bad news is good news. So a storm like Sandy, and we've had a bunch recently, get leaders' attention. They ask good questions on how we're going to protect ourselves, and then that's an opportunity for environmentalists to swoop in and make their case. And yes, ma'am, last question.
I was wondering how much progress you've made with rural people in terms of farming practices.
Oh, thank you. Farming also, I don't have time to talk about all this stuff. Great progress up and down the Mississippi River, for example, here in the U.S., helping farmers understand that some new techniques can provide them better environmental outcomes, will provide all of us the better environmental outcomes, but they also make business sense for the farmers. So a really good example would be reduced till farming or no-till or cover crops. Hugely reduces nutrient runoff into the Mississippi River. That's what creates that horrible dead zone. But it also, for the farmer, retains more moisture in the soil and is improving their business results. Then the challenge for us is, how do you scale those best practices in the fastest way? We're doing that by teaming up with all kinds of farmer organizations, universities, also some of the big players in agriculture, the businesses, to spread those best practices. We're doing the same thing all around the world in places like Indonesia and Brazil. So food and farming and agriculture broadly are a big part of the environmental game plan going forward. Anyway, I better wrap up. I think I overdid my time. Thank you very much for everything you're doing in Cleveland. We're really proud of you.
Great. Thanks again, Mark. One more round of applause. That was really great. Great to have you back in Cleveland and your leadership on all these issues. So next up, the city of Cleveland is proud to be a partner in the year-long community-wide commemoration of the 50th anniversary of Carl Stokes' election as mayor. Mayor Stokes and his brother, Congressman Louis Stokes, played key roles in the advancement of the city and the nation through the civil rights movement, the environmental movement, and beyond. And as part of the Stokes 50 celebration, we are excited to bring Leon Bibb to the summit. Given his deep knowledge, roots in the city, and really passion for Cleveland, as well as environmental issues, we thought Leon would be a perfect fit to really inspire a group exercise on how to celebrate in 2019, which will follow this. So Leon is a veteran journalist and broadcaster who worked for 16 years at WKYC before joining WEWS, Cleveland's ABC station, in 1995. Leon has covered many national stories, including the Persian Gulf War, when he was embedded with an Ohio-based Coast Guard unit. In 2011, he interviewed President Barack Obama in a one-on-one interview at the White House. Leon has also interviewed President George H.W. Bush, Neil Armstrong, and James Earl Ray, convicted assassin of Martin Luther King Jr. Recently, he's been praised for his series of reports, My Ohio with Leon Bibb, also on News Channel 5. And Leon has received 6 Emmy Awards for his reporting and resides in many halls of fame. I'm not going to name them all. So without further ado, Leon Bibb.
Thank you so much, Matt, and good afternoon, everyone. For those of you from out of town, welcome to Cleveland. Good to have you here. It is a pleasure to be here. My job is to kind of give you a thumbnail sketch of this city over the last 50 years or so, maybe even a little bit longer than that. But I'll give you a very quick thumbnail sketch of Cleveland, and I'm going to use me as an example to get us started. I grew up slow and easy by the shoreline of Lake Erie. We lived in a house on a tree-lined street about a mile from the waters of Lake Erie. Our house had been built in 1920 when the neighborhood was getting its footing. Across the street was our elementary school. It too had been built in 1920. But by the time we had moved in, the house was 30 years old or thereabouts. My father was a World War II veteran. When he came home, he took a while to save enough money to purchase his home. But when the money added it up enough, he moved his young bride and his firstborn child into that house on the east side of Cleveland. I am the firstborn. There were other kids my age in the neighborhood on our block. I got to know them very well. Their stories were very similar to my story. We were children of the 1950s, growing up in what is now called the inner city. But in those days, that phrase was not used. We grew up in Cleveland, in a middle-class neighborhood, on a street with a school across the way. In that elementary school, I would begin the journey toward the speech and this day. In that school, I learned more than the alphabet. I learned how to write. I learned music appreciation. I learned my multiplication tables and abundantly prepared me for junior high school, and later college. I am a child of a city-sponsored Little League baseball league and of soft summer nights where my parents sat on the front porch listening to radio broadcasts and chatting with neighbors who were doing the same thing on their front porches next door. I grew up, as I said, slow and easy, son of a postal clerk and a salesperson in a pharmacy, what we called in those days, she worked in a drugstore, my mother. My mother later sold clothing in a department store. From those times and that Cleveland neighborhood a mile from Lake Erie, I developed a love for language, a respect for people, a deep appreciation for nature with all of its natural resources, which included the lake and a major river just a few miles from my front porch. If there were inequalities in life, and there were, we kids were shielded from them as long as our parents could shield us from some of life's realities. But eventually, year after year, I would learn lessons about life and living and people and nature and the role I would be expected to play in them all. As I said, I grew up slow and easy, the way children should grow up. I am a city boy, having been raised and educated in Cleveland. Our home was on the city's east side, in a neighborhood called Glenville. My parents, sister, and I would often walk or drive the mile to Lake Erie shoreline. The water of that great lake affected life and living in our city. It certainly affected the lives of those who lived so near this greatest asset in this region of our country. My father and mother, as did the parents of the other kids on our street, had wanted homes for their families during this peacetime after they had slogged through the war and the Great Depression before that. I was too young to have a memory of our moving in day on that house in the Glenville area, but I know we lived in that house on Parkgate Avenue for 17 years, and it is there I will find a touchstone of my life. That house that on that street is one of the touchstones. My boyhood friends and I played city-sponsored baseball during the summer months. It was supervised, equipment was included in our activities, and leagues were established at a place called Gordon Park, which is nestled right along the East Shoreway Highway. Lake Erie is almost within a baseball's throw of Gordon Park, where we boys played all summer long, 5 days a week. During the summer months, we were in baseball competition within sight of Lake Erie. Now, I'm not an expert on all of this. I'm not an expert on the lake, but I have been at that shoreline thousands of times since my pre-teenage years. I paint this picture of a city on the shores of a great water, one which has brought a Connecticut surveyor to this part of the world in 1796. Moses Cleveland had traveled from New England to this piece of land where we are right today. He ordered his boat be turned into the mouth of a river which flowed into Lake Erie. The people who lived in this part of the nation was what was termed the Western Reserved. And for centuries, the Native Americans had called that river, not far from where we are right now, the Cuyahoga. In the language of the people who lived here, Cuyahoga meant crooked. It meandered like that. The name reflected how crooked the river was as it snaked its way from the south to Lake Erie, to the broad-chested Lake Erie. But the river and the lake are within sight of where we are this very moment. Moses Cleveland must have said, "This must be the place." He stepped out of his boat on the banks of the Cuyahoga and climbed up the hill from the water. That 1796 day, he and his crew began to survey the area. He must have done a pretty good job. Little settlement grew from his surveys, and they named it after him, Cleveland. Business came and began to grow. The river and the lake played a vital role in Cleveland and in Ohio. During the Civil War in the 1850s, in the 1860s, the city began to really stretch. Armaments were made in Cleveland, and the little town of Cleveland began to increase in population and in business. When I was a boy growing up here, my friends and I would bicycle to both the lake and to its intersection with the Cuyahoga River. We watched the big ore boats bring in products for the making of steel upriver. Steel companies along the river belched out smoke and steel. When I was a kid, Cleveland flexed its industrial muscle as it had done since the 19th century. Certainly when America went to battle in the First and the Second World Wars, steel from the Cuyahoga River Valley also went to war. The Cuyahoga flows through the valley of the shadow of industry. I have uncles who worked in the steel mills during my childhood. During the summers following my freshman and college years, and I worked as summer help for the city. If you go back far enough, you'll see my name on Cleveland's employment rolls. Working for minimum wage for 2 summers, my college-age coworkers and I were assigned to the Ports and Harbors Unit of the city of Cleveland. We were based at Burke Lakefront Airport, the downtown airport. We worked the airport grounds. All of our work was within sight of Lake Erie. During one several weeks period, I actually worked on Lake Erie. Off the shoreline of Gordon Park, 2 iron ore freighters were retired. They were intentionally sunk. It was our jobs to help men who were highly skilled, who cut off the cabins and the decks of those huge ore boats. Later, huge rocks were brought in to cover the decks of those ore boats. The boats were part of a breakwall to protect the Cleveland shoreline. Every day for several weeks, we took a barge and small boats to the big ship as we carried oxygen tanks and tanks of other gases so the workmen could use their cutting torches. I worked the lake, helping my parents to make a living to help my parents cover my college education costs. At one point in Cleveland, the city boasted a population of 900,000, but suburbs began to open up and population left for the outer areas. Cities in the Sun Belt also began to flex their muscle, and some of Cleveland's population went there as well. Then the river itself took a turn, becoming more polluted. So one day in 1969, something sparked a fire in the Cuyahoga River. Whatever it was on the water's surface. It became fuel for the fire. A burning fire certainly will catch, a burning river, rather, will certainly catch your attention. It caught the attention of the world. Cleveland has had to live with that story for 50 years now, almost. By then, I had gone to another war, though. I had come home. I'd been in Vietnam and had come home and was in graduate school studying journalism. I was not in Cleveland on the day of the fire, but I certainly knew of it. The world knew of it. It was a horrible day, but something positive was coming. The Clean Act, the Clean Water Act of 1972 was prompted by what occurred in Cleveland. The burning river story forced this country to re-examine its water and its air. In Cleveland, we often refer to ourselves as the comeback city. We've been up and down, back up again. We're on an upswing right now. The city of my ancestry and my youth is making great strides again. No longer at 900,000 people, but Cleveland still is at the center point of this region of the country. I've been a working journalist in this city for 38 consecutive years, and I've seen much. In 1981, less than 200 yards from where we are right now, maybe less than 150 yards in that direction, I stepped out of the front door of the television station where I worked at that time, that day in 1981, at the corner of East 6th and Rockwell Avenue. You could toss a baseball from here to that corner. A young man pulled up one summer Sunday early evening. I had just finished the 6 o'clock newscast and was stepping out for dinner before I would to do the 11 o'clock news. Sun was still high in the sky that day, temperature very comfortable. Young man was driving a Volkswagen filled with what appeared to be many of his belongings. He pulled to the curb. "Excuse me," he said, "can you tell me where downtown Cleveland is?" I noted the California license plate on his car. He told me he was from San Francisco and was looking for downtown Cleveland. That 1981 Sunday early evening, there were only a few people on the streets of downtown Cleveland. I told him he was in downtown Cleveland, just as you are right now. The young driver noted it seemed awfully quiet. I says, "Yes, that has been a problem." It was around that point that Cleveland began a resurgence. Downtown is alive again, as it has been since I was a youngster. So much business was downtown, including several department stores when I was a kid. Those department stores had moved out to the suburbs now. We have changed. Big department stores no longer here. Still, there is a new Cleveland. There are 15,000 people who live downtown now, many of them living in old buildings which have been repurposed and upgraded and now are homes and apartments for the 21st century. There are plans and projections for the number of downtown livers to reach 25,000 in the next few years or so. As well, at this moment of time, we note the 50th anniversary of the election of Carl Stokes as the first black person elected to a major American city, Cleveland, 1967. At that time, Cleveland was 2/3 white, and this black man, this attorney, this state legislator, this descendant of American slaves, defeated Seth Taft, the grandson of President William Howard Taft. I was not in Cleveland for that 1967 election day. I was in Vietnam, having been drafted into the war. I was a soldier, but also one who tried to keep up with events going on at home. I voted using an absentee ballot, marking my X by the name of Carl Stokes. I remember sitting under a Vietnam sun and marking my ballot and sending it through the Army's postal system for the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections here in Cleveland. So significant was Cleveland's Carl Stokes election 50 years ago, his image graced the front pages worldwide, including the military's Far East edition of Stars and Stripes, a copy of which I sent to the then mayor-elect. I sent it with a letter. I wrote to Carl Stokes, Mayor-elect Stokes, and that letter has since been included in the Stokes Archive and periodically is displayed in museum settings. Cleveland, on the map, politically, a black person elected as a big city mayor for the first time in this country. Political figures from around the country journeyed from here to study the Stokes campaign, led by Carl, Louis Stokes, his brother, who would later go into Congress for a 30-year run, and Arnold Pinckney, another of the Stokes architects. Time and other news magazines put Carl Stokes on the cover. There was even talk of perhaps a vice presidential bid for Carl Stokes in 1967. Many years later, President Barack Obama would say publicly to Louis Stokes, the brother, Without Carl Stokes, in Cleveland, there would be no Barack Obama in the White House. There is a direct connection between these two events. Cleveland, another turning point in a city with certainly an historic past. Cleveland was Motown before Detroit. Do you know, between 1897 and 1915 or so, automobiles sped from many Cleveland car manufacturers. The Winton, the Peerless, the Baker, the Jordan, and many others were made in Cleveland. In 1897, Alexander Winton drove his car from Cleveland to New York City. First time ever to journey in a car that far. This, of course, was before highways as we know them. It took a long time for the trip to New York in 1897, but Alexander Winton, driving his Winton automobile, was successful. He took with him a French journalist who chronicled the trip in the Winton horseless carriage. It was that journalist who coined the French word l'automobile. French, but also Cleveland. Automobiles, steel, textiles, oil, John D. Rockefeller, Clevelander. Politics, Carl Stokes, Clevelander. Armaments for war from the Civil War through the 20th century. Shipping, the inland seas, which makes Lake Erie a world port. Troubling times, too, we've seen. Riots and over racial issues, crime, pockets of poverty, job losses, but still this city holds on and hangs in. The Republicans chose Cleveland for the 2016 National Convention just last year. Political controversy, you know that, swirled around the party's candidates. Nation braced for trouble, but in Cleveland there was little trouble on the streets of Cleveland. There were only 24 arrests in the streets, and they were all misdemeanors during that Republican convention last year. A reporter from the East Coast wrote, "I came to Cleveland prepared to cover a riot. Instead, I covered a block party." That's exactly what it was. Cleveland. Cuyahoga River still crooks its way through it, dissecting the city with its watery boundary. The east side, west side debate is not as large as it once was. Journeys from one side of town to the other flow much easier these days, maybe taking an idea from the easy flowing Cuyahoga, which flows through the center of the city. Although we like to think of ourselves as a single city, and we are, we're also a city of many neighborhoods, each with a personality. As well, our major waters, the Cuyahoga and Lake Erie, still give this city part of its character. Both are cleaner now, as we look to both of them as a wonderful natural resource. When the TBS team of sports commentators, the network TBS, sports commentators last year in 2016, badmouthed Cleveland because the Cleveland Indians baseball team had won the American League pennant and was bound for the World Series, producers at that national TBS network put up a graphic showing a big fire along a river with the words superimposed over that fire, "Welcome to Cleveland." I was incensed, and I called the network out in a commentary. First, the photograph was of a burning pipeline along a river's edge in Moscow, Russia. It was not even Cleveland. Second, the burning river was nearly 50 years old at that time, and the river had been since cleaned so thoroughly it has been hailed as clean water, so much so that the fish have long since returned. My commentary that night on television on the ABC station in Cleveland drew more than 1 million hits on our Facebook and website page on my television station in 2 days. More than 1 million, 1.1 million, and still counting. From all over the world, I received support from Clevelanders who were living elsewhere and from people who thought TBS should have been taken apart. Next day, day 2 of my commentary, I went back on the air and reported we'd received an apology from TBS. We've come a long way, but there have been positive changes in this city, and I, for one, have decided to defend my town. We are glad you are here. My name is Leon Bibb. If you'd like to talk with me further about why I love this city, meet me at the convergence of the winding Cuyahoga River, where it meets the broad-chested Lake Erie. That's the point where Cleveland began. We are working to sustain Cleveland and what it offers. At the edge of the big waters, you will find Cleveland, Ohio, open for business. And thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Leon. No better defender or advocate for Cleveland. One more round of applause for Leon Bibb. Thank you for another successful summit. So many great ideas. I hope you all had a good time. Got to disconnect for a day and a half here a bit and just meet a lot of new people, say hi to some old friends, and learn some things. Just even from yesterday, the energy around the room, I think, as we start thinking towards June 22nd, 2019 was amazing. And we could have spent 3 hours going around the room yesterday with all the great ideas out there. So thank you again for just all that energy, and we'll take all that going forward. Speaking of ideas, it was brought up earlier by Indigo, but we do have this opportunity for funding for projects. So definitely check in with Indigo if there is a project that you think you want to get support for. And there is a one-to-one match for that, up to $5,000. So every dollar you raise, essentially through the IOB crowdfunding platform, you'll get another dollar potentially for that work. So please check that out. Another thing Bianca mentioned was the workshops. Something just to stay tuned for. One group mentioned, this takes place during a weekday, and it was a very true statement. It does limit to some degree participation. Of course, weekends limit participation for others. So we have to have events at all hours of the day, essentially. So those 10 neighborhood workshops we're going to have over the next probably 5-6 months are going to be in 10 different neighborhoods on weekends, after work. So definitely stay tuned for that. It would be great if you can come to at least one of those. I think it'll be a great opportunity to think about this work, but at a very neighborhood level. A bike ride. Who's going to be joining the bike ride? It's going to be great. We have Jim Sheehan from Ohio City Bike Co-op. There he is, waving his bike helmet back there. Should we meet you in the back? Yeah. So a few of you are renting bikes. There's also UH bikes right out front if you want to take one of those. And I think some of you actually rode here as well. So about a 30 to 45-minute ride around some of our newest trails. And it's going to end at Rebel in Public Square. We're going to have a happy hour, some more snacks. So we really hope you can join us for that. And the final note, we are going to send out a survey after this just to get feedback. We want to keep improving these summits year after year. So please take a few minutes to fill out that survey. So I think those are all my big points before I bring up the mayor for some final closing remarks. So thank you again, and hope to see you soon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I want to congratulate our Office of Sustainability for another successful summit. I want to thank Matt, his staff, all of the people who volunteered, and all those who made this summit successful. But most of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for participating. Many of you have been here multiple times before. Some of you is your first time. But I want to thank you so much for your willingness to participate, because without your willingness, without your focus, this would not work. So you being here, you participating, you engaging, you doing the reporting out, really helps us as a city to stay focused on our game to ensure that Cleveland will be a sustainable city and that we are moving in the right direction to reform our economy into a sustainable economy by 2019, and to be able to do those things that we need to do to make this what we have called a green city on the Blue Lake. So again, thank you very much. Thank you.